The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast, connecting Virginians to their government. We're pleased to connect you with a new member, Delegate Mark Levine. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Woody.
Well, tell us, how have you enjoyed your first few days here?
I am enjoying it. This is, what, day 5? I'm barely here, and I've already done so much. And it's almost like every day is like 4 or 5 days here. So much can get done in a brief period of time, and I'm loving it here. Well,
tell us a little bit about yourself. We were talking earlier. You're originally from Nashville, Tennessee.
I am.
You've got a real family heritage there.
I do.
Talk to us about that.
Well, on my mother's side, I'm a third-generation Southerner. My great-grandfather, several great-grandparents actually came to this country, so I guess I'm a third-generation American. I was a peddler in New Orleans. I know he had $20 to his name, according to the Ellis Island Manifest, and used to sell women's clothing door to door. And my family came to Nashville. My immediate family, my mom, came there in the 1940s and has been there ever since.
Great. So where did you go to undergraduate and graduate school?
I went to Harvard College, got a magna cum laude degree in economics there. Then I had a Fulbright to study for a year in Switzerland at the Université de Neuchâtel, so I still speak French with a Swiss accent. And then I went to Yale Law School.
Great. And so what brought you to the Commonwealth of Virginia?
Well, I actually practiced law in Los Angeles for a few years as a trial lawyer. And then Bush v. Gore kind of changed my life.
I think we remember that case. Went to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, I was just a lawyer in Los Angeles, but I was following the case very closely. It's politics, it's law, it's constitutional law, which is something that I care a lot about. Many people know I'm the guy that carries the Constitution with me wherever I go.
Right.
And I was shocked to see the United States Supreme Court flagrantly violate the law. And basically make up new law that had no precedent, and they even said in the opinion, this shall not be cited as precedent. They basically said, we don't give a damn about the law, we're going to install Bush as president. And then I was shocked to see that people were just sort of accepting that. So I wrote, began as an email that I sent to maybe 25 people, but I know it's gone around hundreds of thousands of people since then, basically describing the opinion in Bush v. Gore and explaining why it was a farce, why it had absolutely no connection with any kind of law, constitutional or otherwise. The Supreme Court was saying contradictory things, saying that we are not going to set a time limit for elections, and here's the time limit for elections. And we're going to count every vote, but we're not going to count these votes. And the opinion reminded me of Lewis Carroll. It was just jabberwocky. It was absolutely self-contradictory. And I sent that email out just as a lawyer in Los Angeles to maybe 25 people, urged them to pass it on, and it just got hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of people saw that one little email. Michael Moore picked it up. Congressman Henry Waxman picked it up. Sandra Day O'Connor, the Justice of the Supreme Court, her clerk told me that I was right and his boss was wrong. And that actually got me on radio throughout the country. But it also got me hired by the Congressional Black Caucus, who hired me as their attorney. Again, I just sent emails, all I'd done.
Right.
But they hired me as an attorney to challenge the Bush Florida electors. So I wrote that brief in 2000, and then shortly after got a job by Congressman Barney Frank to be his legislative counsel. And I served him for a number of years on Capitol Hill. So that brought me to the Washington, D.C. area. And then I just fell in love with Alexandria, particularly Old Town Alexandria. I love history, and there's so much history there. And I still, to this day, give tours of Old Town, walking tours, and it's just fantastic. The good, the bad, and the ugly, because there's all kinds of history in Alexandria. But I do love very much where I live, and I've been there 15 years.
Great. So I think you sent out more than an email in order to get elected. Talk to us about your campaign.
Well, sure. This is actually my second campaign. Many people know I ran for Congress in 2014 in a race where maybe, I don't know, 12, 14, 16 of us ran.
Remember that one.
It was an open seat when Jim Moran left the government, and Don Beyer won in a landslide. Clean my clock, you might say. Don and I actually are good friends now. We're bridge partners, and he was very supportive in my current delegate campaign. There were 5 of us for the open seat left by Rob Krupika. Many of us know he left to pursue his donut business. And frankly, it was a real surprise. None of us knew he was going to retire. And we had just a few days to jump in. But having done the congressional campaign and learned a lot. It was my first time running for office. I learned a lot the hard way, frankly. I felt I could run a much more effective delegate campaign, and I knocked on more than 1,000 doors, and my team more than, I think, 12,000. I had a lot of doors, talked to people at farmers markets and churches and really all across the district, and squeaked through to a primary victory, and then ran unopposed in the general.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Was the lesson learned in that congressional race that the need for a real grassroots outreach effort is critical?
Yes, and it's easier to do in a delegate race. I mean, it's just the district's smaller. You really can't reach out and knock door to door throughout the 8th Congressional District, not easily. I tried. But in a delegate race, it's actually great. You get to know your voters. By election day, primary election day, I was at virtually all the precincts. And people would come up to me and say, Mark, I met you at the farmer's market. Mark, I met you at this community meeting. Mark, you came to my church. I felt like I knew the voters and they knew me. And it could be very personal retail politics that it's really hard to do in a congressional race. Also learned how to, staff a campaign and how to work a database and how to file financial reports and all these things that I had no idea how to do the first time I ran.
So what were some of the fundamental issues and concerns you heard from the voters when you were running?
Well, there are a lot of them. I would say well, I don't want to know if there's a single one because there's a lot of them. A big issue is the issue of guns. I think a lot of people in the district are tired of having so many lax gun laws that allow people with mental illnesses, people who are committed felons, terrorists, to have easy access to guns. That's a big issue. The minimum wage is a big issue, and to have people basically earn a decent wage for the work that they do. There are issues of education. A lot of people were upset with all the standards of learning tests or want to make higher education more affordable or support pre-K. There are issues of supporting unions. There's issues for teachers, make sure teacher salaries are higher. There's transportation issues people talked about. There's a whole host of them. Medicaid expansion was big for most people. It certainly is for me. Here's a way at no cost to the Virginia government, particularly now with a new proposal that I support. That's the governor's proposal. I worked with the hospitals as well to pay for Virginia's share. So now it costs absolutely nothing to save tens of thousands of lives, hundreds of thousands of people, put them on health insurance, and can save the Commonwealth hundreds of millions of dollars directly for the federal government, $2.5 billion indirectly. It's a win-win, win-win-win, and certainly the people in my district understand that. I love representing Alexandria because my values are their values, and their values are my values. And when I come out there and I have some strong progressive proposals, like I have a proposal for paid family medical leave. And in my district, that's, no one questions that. That's obviously a woman who's just had a baby shouldn't have to go back to work the next day. And no one in my district questions that. And no one questions the need, very few, for strong gun safety regulations. It's a privilege to represent Alexandria, Arlington, and Fairfax and to share their values. And I'm looking forward to keep doing it.
Great. Lots of enthusiasm there.
Oh, yeah. I love my district.
And I know you have a multitude of initiatives that you have pre-filed in the General Assembly. So let's talk about some of those. You've mentioned some of those. Minimum wage. Talk to us about how critical that is.
Well, it really is because, let's face it, the Northern Virginia is more expensive than other areas of the Commonwealth. And what my bill does is it allows localities to set the wage, to raise it up to $10 an hour. They can raise it any level they want. If a town in Southwest Virginia doesn't want to raise the minimum wage, they wouldn't have to. Alexandria, Arlington, and Fairfax, I'm quite confident the local governments there would raise the minimum wage. And, frankly, this is supposed to be a conservative value, to let localities make decisions, that local government is the government closest to the people. And let your local representatives decide these questions. Let them decide what makes sense as a minimum wage. The minimum wage hasn't been raised in a very long time, $7.25 an hour. We just have the federal one. If you are a tipped worker, someone who works in a restaurant, it's $2.13 an hour. $2.13 an hour. Hasn't gone up since 1990 when it was $2.05 an hour, plus tips. But you see, if you complain that you're not getting the minimum wage, as you have a right to your employer, they might give you 4 p.m. on Tuesday instead of 8 p.m. on Saturday night. a time when no one comes into the restaurant. And they have full power to do that. And I talked to some people getting tips in my district who said, you know, we really can't complain. And $2.13, that's not enough to buy a cup of coffee in a lot of restaurants in Alexandria. And they're going to work for a full hour and not be able to buy a cup of coffee. It's really way too low. And I know that the Alexandria city government would raise the minimum wage in an instant, but the state holds them down. The state, under the Dillon rule, doesn't allow localities to have this power. So I would relax the Dillon rule and say, hey, state, let Alexandria raise it to one level. Arlington may choose another. Fairfax may choose another. Danville or Lynchburg or Bristol may choose somewhere else. And let's just allow the people to decide what is a fair minimum wage.
Now, I'm sure you studied this issue in some detail, especially in terms of what happens once a minimum wage is raised.
Yes.
Either it be across state border lines or amongst localities. What has been the impact?
Well, there wouldn't be much of an impact in terms of jobs or anything like that. D.C. has a higher minimum. You know, when I look at Alexandria, Arlington, and Fairfax, I'm really not comparing them that much to Bristol or Lynchburg because very few people live in Alexandria and work in Lynchburg, or vice versa. People in Alexandria work in the District of Columbia, or they work perhaps in Prince George's County or Montgomery County, Maryland. Both D.C. and Maryland have higher minimum wages, so it wouldn't disrupt Northern Virginia jobs at all.
Talk to us a little bit more about the gun safety. You talked about the need and especially the concerns of your constituents about the amount of gun violence, the easy access to guns. So talk to us about that issue and what your legislation would do.
We had a public hearing in Alexandria where constituents could bring up any topic they wished. And I don't know, maybe 25 or 30 people came and spoke to us. Half of the constituents talked about guns. So half talked about all other issues. Half talked about guns. This is an issue we know about the mass shootings all across the country. President Obama has talked again and again and again, and I very much value the things that he's doing on this score. But we don't want someone to come into some, I'll hesitate to say, but a theater or a mall or a school. We know Newtown in Colorado and Arizona. I mean, I don't know, San Bernardino. There's so many, you can't even mention them all. And what I firmly believe is that we need to keep criminals from getting guns. We need to keep terrorists from getting guns. If you are a law-abiding citizen and you want to have a gun, that's fine by me. That's not a concern, and those people shouldn't be concerned. But even gun owners, law-abiding gun owners, some 80% of them support background checks. Some polls even show 85% of them support background checks. 75% of NRA members support background checks. So I have very limited scope bills. One is to regulate online sales. The Colorado killer, the one that went in theater, and I try not to name them. I don't want to give them that any more notoriety they already have. But the Colorado killer got a ton of ammunition over the internet. It is really easy to buy over the internet. I don't really care to name the sites. I don't really care to help anyone buy them. But there are sites that sell tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of guns and ammunition, no questions asked. In fact, you go in there and you say, I want to buy a gun, no questions asked. And then you schedule to meet somebody in a parking lot somewhere, and stranger to stranger sells the gun, sells the ammunition, including some really dangerous guns like semi-automatic weapons, AR-15s, AK-47s, really, really dangerous things that every time you push your finger, you can shoot someone. And they sell them without background checks.
Unlike at a gun show where most of the vendors are federally licensed.
That's true. Although at a gun show, there are people there who can sell outside of federally firearms, outside the gun show loophole. But you're right. Internet sales are far more serious than gun show sales. And so my bill would regulate internet sales. It would say, if you want to buy online, you got to get a background check. You can do it through a federally licensed firearm dealer, or you can do it through your local police. Either way. Frankly, if you're willing to submit to a background check to your local police, I'm not concerned about you. You're willing to submit to a background check, your federally licensed firearm dealer, that's fine. We had some 2 million across the country. Some 2 million people have been turned down for guns because they failed these background checks. But because of this loophole, and again, the gun show loophole is much smaller than the internet loophole. So I want to one of them would regulate these internet sales. The other one is to say, if you're on the terrorist watch list, if the federal government, if the FBI has reason to believe that you are a terrorist, you are a member of ISIS or Al-Qaeda, so bad they won't even let you fly on a plane, you shouldn't be able to buy some kind of semi-automatic weapon. I mean, on a plane, what's the worst you could do? I guess you could strangle someone or stab them with your little plastic knife. You could do that in a mall. You could do that walking on the street. I'm not sure why we wouldn't let them even fly. If you're so dangerous you can't fly on a plane, then you're plenty dangerous enough that we shouldn't be able to sell you some of these very, very dangerous weapons. And I think it's a very modest proposal because, let's face it, you can get your name off that list. You can go the ACLU actually tells you how to get your name off that list. And if we're taking away your right to fly, that's a far more serious deprivation, I think, of your privileges than your right to own a very, very dangerous weapon. So that's the second one. The third bill, which I'm co-patroning with Alfonso Lopez and Senator Adam Evan, is a bill that says you can't give a loaded gun to a child under 5. Now, this would seem really obvious. But this bill failed last year. Because there were people in the subcommittee that said, you know what, you're not going to tell me how to raise my children. Well, you know, I don't think you should give a child arsenic. I don't think you should put a child's hand on a hot stove. And I don't think you should give a child under 5 a loaded weapon. I don't think these are complex things. And I think if you do that, you're not a good parent. We maybe even should consider, frankly, taking your kids away from you. A child under 5 cannot handle a loaded weapon. And again, there's some, you know, we don't allow parents to to put their kids out in the middle of the street with a car coming. I mean, there's, you know, come on. This is basic stuff. And I think it shows how ridiculous some of our opposition is. If they're not willing to say you can't give a loaded weapon to a child under 5, they're not taking this issue seriously. We liberals are saying we're fine that people want to hunt. We're fine that people want guns of self-defense. Just don't be a criminal. Don't be a terrorist. Submit to a background check. You know, maybe get a license, like we have a license to drive a car. I got to pass a test to drive a car. These are basic minimal safety things. You know, today we've got manufacturers of stuffed animals, and we require them not to make the eyes so small they can choke down a child's throat, right? And if they don't, they can be held liable. But you can hand a loaded gun to a 4-year-old? These laws make no sense, and I can't imagine what tyranny or Second Amendment or any kind of defense we're doing by saying, let's give loaded guns to kindergartners or preschoolers. This is ridiculous. People need to recognize what laws make sense and what laws don't make sense, and not just blindly vote for anything the NRA says to vote for.
So what you're saying is no constitutional right is inviolate. There's always room for reasonable regulation of any constitutional right.
Well, there is. We know that the First Amendment, for example, you can't shout fire in a crowded theater. You can't commit libel or slander. You know, I point out, and the Supreme Court I know disagrees with me on this, but I point out that the Second Amendment says that a well-regulated militia, being necessary to secure a free state, the right to keep and bear arms, shall not be infringed. And it's interesting because the Supreme Court held in the Heller case, 5-4, very close decision. They said, we're going to ignore the first half of the Second Amendment. We think the founders didn't mean half of what they said. It's all just advisory. I think every word in this Constitution has meaning. I think every word should be respected. I think if you don't like a provision in the Constitution, you should seek to amend the Constitution rather than just saying, we don't like it, we're going to ignore it. I strongly disagree with that Supreme Court decision. But even if there were an individual right to bear arms, the Supreme Court has made clear that they're going to decide where that right lies. And I think that even this Supreme Court would not say that a 4-year-old has a right to carry a firearm, even if they're not serving in a militia.
And of course, recently the Attorney General, Herring, has taken an action that has caused some consternation about gun rights activists, as well as the governor, who has now banned all firearms from state buildings. I assume
except the General Assembly building, the building where we sit.
That's an exception?
It is, or the state capitol, because the General Assembly is in charge of the premises where we sit and the state capitol. So that's, I guess I shouldn't let people know this, but there is an exception. I think most people probably do know that already, to these buildings, which again I think is a mistake. I think that government buildings should be free of guns unless held by security officers or the police that are designed to protect us.
Now, what about the concealed carry permit ruling that the Attorney General just came out with?
Well, you know, My problem is that our concealed carry permit laws are too lax, in the sense that our open carry law is even more lax. So we have some strange laws in Virginia. The law says that for concealed carry, you got to pass this little 30-minute internet test. If you fail it, you just keep trying until you get it, I guess. That is actually more stringent than open carry, where you could be a mentally ill terrorist, ex-murderer, felon, ISIS member, and you just walk in on the internet and you order up your AR-15 and 1,000 bullets, and no questions asked. The gun is sold to you legally, and then you go on your killing spree. That's perfectly legal in Virginia, and that's open carry. So it seems to me that now some states do have better laws on this. Colorado, for example, I know requires you to know how to handle a firearm before you get one, just like I said, Virginia requires you to know how to handle a car before you drive a car. So the problem is with the concealed carry reciprocity, it's a race to the bottom. And unfortunately, Virginia is probably near the bottom in terms of minimal requirements. I'd like to see gun owners know how to handle a gun. And I've talked with lots of gun owners, and they tell me they do know how to handle a gun. Virtually everyone I've talked to, they know how to handle, they know how to shoot, they know safety, they know about the locks, they know what to do. And they proudly tell me about all the training they've had. And some of them are NRA members that actually do the training. And I say, wouldn't it be great if everyone had the training and expertise you had? And every one of them has said, yeah, it would be great. So my problem is not trained, licensed gun owners. My problem is people who are untrained or have committed crimes or are mentally ill. And virtually all the people who've committed these horrific acts across the country are criminals, terrorists, mentally ill.
Tell us about your advocacy in terms of LGBT issues.
Yes. So I am the third openly gay member of the General Assembly, and that's something that I've worked on for, 20 years now. I'd say I was very active in the marriage equality movement. I was the co-founder of Marriage Equality California when I lived out there. I wrote D.C.'s marriage equality bill with Phil Mendelson. We rewrote the prior draft together. I defended it in court. Glad to say that became law. I've been active on a wide range of fronts. The bill that I'm introducing here would ban discrimination on the basis of employment or housing or public accommodation. So really, it's long past due. In fact, I think most Americans, most Virginians think it's already the law, but it's not. In Virginia, it is the law in some other states.
Sure.
In Virginia, you can say, I'm sorry, I don't hire gay people. I'm sorry, we don't hire lesbians, we don't hire transgendered people. People should be hired based on how good a job they do. You do a bad job, fire someone. You do a good job, hire someone. But this idea, we're going to have whole classes of people, they can't be hired or fired. We have these laws with regard to race and national origin and religion and gender. They need to be expanded to LGBT.
So it discourages people to advocate their gender preference then, if they want to get a job.
People, I know well from being gay that there are people that stay in the closet because of prejudice. And it's really harmful. It's harmful, frankly, to everyone. It's harmful to a 16-year-old lesbian girl who doesn't feel that she can openly have a girlfriend because she's afraid she can't get a job. She's afraid that she'll be hated. Once people come out, I think the great revolution in LGBT rights has been people coming out of the closet. So, I mean, most people who come to me for any issues, a lot of people don't even know I'm gay, frankly, and many of them don't focus on that. I've got such a wide range agenda on a number of issues. That's actually just very much only part of who I am. I'm not the gay delegate. I'm a delegate who happens to be gay. I want people to live out their full potential. I don't want their sexual orientation to hold them back in any way, or their gender identity. I would argue that, frankly, sexual orientation, we've kind of crossed over. I think today most Americans are not prejudiced against gay, lesbian, bisexual people. Transgender, I think, are having a bit tougher time. I think that Caitlyn Jenner has done amazing work, just that one person, in helping people find acceptance. At the end of the day, judge people, quote Dr. Martin Luther King, judge people by the content of their character, not by who they love or the color of their skin or anything like that. And this bill will pass. It may not pass this session, but I'm quite confident this bill will eventually become law throughout the United States and certainly in Virginia.
Now, as a nation, we incarcerate a lot of people.
We do.
In the state of Virginia, we incarcerate a lot of people.
Yes, we do.
A lot of it is drug-related, and I know you have a bill to decriminalize the use of marijuana.
I do. I actually have 3 bills on relating to criminal law. I do have a bill to decriminalize marijuana, to take it out of the criminal sector and put it in civil law. Now, to be fair, I advocate legalizing marijuana. I would legalize it, tax it, regulate it, treat it just like tobacco and alcohol. You know, we're restricted from minors, and, you know, you can't be driving while high, just like you can't be driving while drunk. But at the end of the day, I think people have the right to make decisions, even decisions I think are foolish, as long as they're not harming me. That's the problem with the guns, is that they can use those to harm me. But if you're high, I'm not going to hire you. And I can tell you, I've never smoked a joint myself, so I don't even like it around me. So don't smoke marijuana around me. Okay, I don't like tobacco smoke. I don't like marijuana smoke. It gives me a sore throat. Okay, I don't. But just because I personally don't like it, I'm not out to change decisions of everyone and to put the people in jail. Whatever you think about marijuana, and again, I told you, I don't like it. To put people in jail, to say for the rest of their lives they're going to have this conviction because they tried marijuana, which probably half of Americans or more have tried. What, now half of us are all criminals? It doesn't make any sense. So I have several bills. One is to make marijuana a civil wrong, like a traffic ticket, like $100 you pay a civil infraction. The other one I have, though, it's equally important because a lot of people have made a mistake in their past. They've been caught with marijuana or some low-level drug, and they've been convicted. And usually they don't go to jail, they pay a fine, but it carries them with them for the rest of their life. You could have someone who at age 20 gets a marijuana conviction, and 30 years later at age 50, they're asked, hey, have you ever been convicted of a crime? When they apply for a job at Starbucks or Macy's or whatever, and they have to say, yes, I have, and they have to explain it, and maybe they just get thrown out to begin with. 30 years later, they're still paying the penalty for a mistake they made as a kid. So one bill I'm particularly proud of, it's a one mistake, you're okay, Bill. I got to think of a better name for it. But
so it's the reverse of 3 strikes.
It is. You get 1 free pass. And it says if you have 1 nonviolent, and nonviolent's crucial because I don't have any sympathy for violent criminals. But if you have nonviolent possession of drugs, and you've paid your fine, you've done your probation, your community service, and you've gone a whole year, 1 time in your life, you can get that removed from your record. So you can honestly say you've never been convicted of a crime. And that means that you won't be stuck trying to get a job, an entry-level job 30 years later. Now, if you get 2, they'll get you, and you only get 1 free pass. At some point, the law comes to get you. But to me, this is a very modest measure that allows people to get past some of the mistakes of their youth.
Thanks. I've enjoyed you being on the show, Delegate Mark Levine. Hope we get to see you again.
Absolutely. Thanks, Woody.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans.
Mm-hmm.